Hello and welcome to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. My name is Kyle Boone, and I want to give you guys a warm welcome to the second show of our weekly NBA draft series we're doing on this page, breaking down the 2025 NBA draft class, all the storylines surrounding it. Today, we're talking Cooper Flagg. Super pumped to do this. Last week, we did a show, Adam Finklestein and I, breaking down a lottery mock draft, so that was a lot of fun. Adam Finklestein, the 247 Sports Director of Scouting, is with me again today. Mr. Finklestein will be carrying us. We're going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the main event himself, Mr. Number One High School prospect, Mr. Montverde megastar, Duke All-American freshman candidate. How excited are you to talk about Cooper Flagg, a guy who is up from kind of your neck of the woods?
The pride of Maine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me just say that New England waited a long time to say the two best young prospects in the world are from New England. Cooper Flagg from Maine and AJ from Massachusetts. So yeah, I'm pumped. Looking forward to it.
Love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Before we jump in, just want to say, hey, again, last week's mock draft lottery on the page. Go back, like it. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you get notifications for the show. We're doing this every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Also, Adam Finklestein has a mock draft on cbssports.com. You can go check that out as well. We have a mock draft page on cbssports.com where you can see all of our mock drafts all on one page. I have a mock draft out there. I believe Gary Parrish has a mock draft out there. Cameron Salerno will have a mock draft out there soon if he doesn't have one already. So we're going to do a lot of mock drafts, a lot of NBA draft coverage here in the coming weeks and months leading up to this summer's NBA draft. But first, we're going to talk about Cooper Flagg today. Before we jump in, before we roll up our sleeves here and really dive in, I'm going to throw it to the one, the only, Mr. Nada Edwards for a quick break, and then we'll jump in. The Masters is coming up, baby. All right. The Bio Blast for Mr. Cooper Flagg. Let's hop in here. He has a twin brother named Ace, who's committed to Maine. Has an older brother, Hunter, who I believe is actually coaching basketball somewhere in Maine right now. His mother played college basketball at Maine. His dad, Ralph, played at Eastern Maine Community College. So this guy is a Maine legend. Yeah, he is a very well-known it's a very well-known basketball name in the region. What can you tell us more about Ace, by the way? Because Ace and Cooper played together at Montverde. They played together at Maine. Just kind of the backstory of Cooper and his upbringing.
You know what I can tell you about Ace is that he is 100% comfortable in his own skin. Yeah. There's no sibling rivalry that I've ever seen that I've ever seen. He's a really good defender. He's tough. He's physical. He's gritty. In some of those runs in like the E16 of the Peach Jam, he was the one guarding Cameron Boozer just because he would body up with him, even though he was giving up a couple inches. And he's really smart too. He can really, really pass. So he's one of those like mismatch interior guys. So I think first of all, I think the Maine fans are going to love him. Shout out Chris Markwood doing a great job there. But yeah, Ace is a really good player on his own right, and I just think it's such a credit to Ace and to that family that both of them are just very comfortable being the best version of themselves, and there's no sibling rivalry there.
Yeah, it is pretty cool to see. I wish we could have seen the two playing together, but obviously Cooper ended up reclassifying up a year. He is now 2024 prospect eligible for the 2025 NBA draft class. Not the case for his twin brother, Ace. Let's run through a timeline here from kind of high school to present before we look ahead, kind of projecting his NBA future. Fink, Cooper Flagg first got his first Division I offer as an 8th grader from Bryant. For you as a high school analyst, and you've been covering college basketball, high school recruiting in particular for a very long time. When did Mr. Flagg kind of catch you by surprise to really pop on the radar? Was it when Bryant decided, hey, this dude is worth an offer, or was it before then?
I know he had already had a reputation when he was in middle school. There were already people, whether it was representatives from Nike or the various shoe circuits going out and seeing him at that point. I don't care how good anyone is when they're in 8th grade. I joke. I start to itch if I have to watch, like that. I mean, the kid's like 13 years old. Let's give it some time. So the first time when I ever evaluated him was in the spring of his freshman year. And it was right before I left ESPN to come here. And it was kind of like, I remember this well, actually. It was kind of like, hey, for the last thing you do, would you go? And everybody knows, both here and I don't like watching 15s. Like I don't, like I said, I'm not a big proponent in watching too much of the kids when they're that young. So it was like, hey, go over. This was at Disney's Wide World of Sports. It was like, hey, go over to court 15 on the Milk House. There's 2 freshmen playing there. Figure out who's the best one, and just before you leave. And those 2 players happened to be Cooper Flagg and Cam Boozer. And by that time, like, John Shire was already over there watching, and that was the beginning, right? That was the end of their freshman year. Cam Boozer had already won a state championship, so he was right there with them. And those 2 guys have ended up being as good as advertised. But they were in the same class initially.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Flagg began his high school career, obviously, in Maine. Became the first freshman to become Maine Gatorade Player of the Year. He transfers to Montverde Academy after his freshman year, ends up starring there as expected. The centerpiece as a senior for a team that included like Asa Noel, Rob Wright, Liam McNeely, Derek Queen, Curtis Givens. I mean, just like crazy talented team. We talked about it before. That Montverde Academy team might be like piece for piece, like the most talented high school team.
Best team I've ever seen.
There you go. And so in 2023, you actually did an official eval on him in July that year, projecting him as a top 10 pick, which real bold there, Fink.
No. You know what? I saw you put this on the doc, and I was like, shout out editor Trey. That's definitely, that's not something I would do. Like, shout out editor Trey, just clicking that button. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that's terrific. The scouting report is mine, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so, you tagged him as an elite 2-way talent, and you're, like the actual scouting report obviously gets into details of why he's such an elite prospect. He reclassified officially shortly thereafter, as many expected, from the 2025 class to 2024, making him draft eligible for the 2025 draft. That is because he recently turned 18 years old, so he checks all the boxes there. Committed to Duke in October 2023, briefly considered UConn, signed with Duke in November, enrolled in summer of 2024. Now fast forward January 2025, as we sit here on January 23rd, 2025, he is the betting favorite for Player of the Year, for a Duke team that's ranked number 2 in the AP poll. Some have Duke as the betting favorite to win the national championship, depending on kind of where you look, averaging 19.2 points per game, 8.1 rebounds per game, 4.1 assists per game. He leads Duke in every statistical category, basically.
Yep.
And so what have you seen kind of in terms of his evolution, Fink? Because, you've seen him from a pretty early age, right? And you've seen kind of his transformation. I remember covering him at Montverde. NBA TV did one of his games, and I called one of his games. And obviously at that point, like as a senior, he was a tremendous talent, a 2-way talent who can create, who can score, who could play defense at a really elite level, like at a really good shot blocker. But he has really developed even this year at Duke in a way that I think is really encouraging. So what have you seen from him? Obviously you have him as your number 1 prospect in your latest mock draft.
Yeah, so I think the first time we saw him like really take it to another level, because he basically skipped his junior year, right? He played his sophomore season at Montverde, and then he reclassified and became a senior. And in between those, he played with his Maine United team on the Nike circuit, and they ended up getting all the way to the final in that game I referenced, where they played the Boozers and Knight Riders Elite. Knight Riders Elite won the game. But Cooper Flagg in that summer just put up like video game numbers. And for a kid who was really unselfish, really content to play in the flow, and I want to say Montverde's like 3rd leading scorer his sophomore season, this was the first time that we saw some real evidence of being capable of being the primary creator. And, going and getting 30-point triple doubles and throwing passes to himself off the backboard. And truth be told, the level of competition was such that he could just dominate because he wasn't playing 17s or the full EYBL. He was playing what's called E16, which means 16 and under, basically the 10th grade division. So, and Boozer was too, so it was, but we saw some tremendous things there. He came back to Montverde and he had a good year and was much more of an offensive focal point, but never really the guy who was going to try and get 30 every night. So I think there were two main variables coming into Duke this year. One was the shooting and one was the self-creation. Those were the things that people and scouts in particular were most interested in monitoring. The shooting numbers have really elevated in the last few weeks. In fact, we just talked about this last Friday on our 24/7 Sports College Basketball show. I got into the weeds a little bit about his mechanics being a little bit different on a set shot, like a spot up set shot, versus when he's shooting on the move or off the dribble, when he tends to elevate and get a real jump shot. So it's somewhat rare that he really has two very different strokes depending on the type of shot he's taking. But his shooting numbers in the last 3 weeks or so are really just going to whole new levels. And simultaneously, we're seeing more self-creation as well. Those couple of turnovers early in that Kentucky game, those got a lot of traction, especially when the mic caught Mark Pope in the Kentucky huddle, basically predicting he was going to spin because that was his go-to move in high school. He did, in fact, spin at the end of that game. He turned it over. But I think the most important thing that we've seen is that the Cooper Flagg of January 23rd is not the Cooper Flagg of November 23rd. He's making another jump. We're seeing more creation. We're seeing more shooting. And all that other positional versatility that we were expecting, specifically the passing, the off-ball defense, and that just hyper competitiveness, that's all still there. So he's going to another level again.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so exciting about Cooper Flagg, right? Is what we've seen from Cooper Flagg even during the season up till now is a lot of maturity, a lot of development, a lot of refinement of his game. And what we know of him January 23rd, 2025 is not what we will see, I don't think, in 2026 or 2028. So his evolution is continuing. Like we talked about, he is one of the youngest players in college basketball this season. Yep. And very well could win National Player of the Year, like one of the youngest, if not the youngest, National Player of the Year award winners if he ends up doing it. So
Boone, I got a good one for you, and this is something we looked up for the show. There's only two freshmen who have won National Player of the Year and then been the number one pick in the draft, and it's Anthony Davis and Zion Williamson. So that's pretty elite company, and I think especially with Joni Broom out with injury. And then, he seems to be gaining some distance in the draft conversation as well. I think he's a strong favorite for both right now.
I totally agree with you. And I think this 2025 class is very interesting because I love Dylan Harper. I love Ace Bailey. I'm very high on Kasparas Jakučionis and Igor Dimin. Like there's a really solid kind of foundational class for NBA teams that are looking, with the lottery pick. But Flagg has separated himself, I think, in a real way. So from that standpoint, Fink, what have you seen from Flagg, or maybe what to you separates Flagg from the Dylan Harper, the Ace Bailey, the VJ Edgecombe? You can't compare them, obviously, because Dylan Harper's a point guard, Ace Bailey's a shooting guard. So you're almost comparing, chicken to steak and beef, right? It's kind of almost a preference thing. Obviously,
give me chicken, the filet.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, filet is superior. But and Flagg is the filet, I guess, in this instance. But what do you think is separating for you as in terms of why you would take Flagg at number one versus Harper, Bailey, any of these other guys?
I mean, there's a few different ways to look at this. I think that coming into the season, I really thought Bailey was the only one who had a chance to contend with Cooper for this spot, just because of the upside. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about a 6'9", let's call him, some people want to say 6'10", 6'9" jumbo wing who is an extreme tough shot maker and a high level athlete. like that's a prototype that is really intriguing. And like I said on last week's show, I'm surprised there's as much, there's as wide a range of opinions on Ace Bailey as there is. Now, granted, there are some concerns, the assist rate is low, the free throw rate is low. So, people want to know how else does he impact the game when he's not scoring? Nobody's asking that about Cooper Flagg. So, and I do think Ace Bailey is, especially in the last couple of weeks, is surging. So I think that upside conversation with him is one we might have again. But Cooper also has the highest floor in the class because he's more than content to be, if he ends up being the number 2 on some team, he's going to be just fine with that. And I think that's such an important piece of this calculus. We were just talking about this with high school rankings, like who's got the best chance to evolve into a legitimate primary offensive weapon. But then if that doesn't happen, like what is their role and how good are they in that role? And I think Cooper would excel in multiple roles. And so that's probably the thing that separates him most right now.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. And Flagg, like earlier in the season, maybe he's not making plays in the clutch, like the Kentucky game, for example. And that was just totally blown out of proportion. Like, well, if he's the number 1 prospect and he, can't get his own bucket late in the game, like what is he? Which is just hilarious and unfair in so many different ways. But Flagg just impacts the game in so many different ways that I think, it's he kind of makes the case for himself as the number 1 prospect just because of what he does on both ends of the floor. Like he is leading Duke in every, relevant statistical category. But even if he wasn't, right, like you just watch the games and how he impacts the game in terms of his play, like his IQ, the way he's able to defend in space, the way he's able to deter shots at the rim and block shots at the rim, the way that he manipulates defenses where they have to account for him, whether he's, playing in the post or playing out on the perimeter. Like he is a triple threat in terms of his ability to create on the perimeter, in terms of being able to attack the basket or to create from the post. So there's so many different ways that he can beat you. And, at his size, with that type of versatile skill set, there's a lot obviously to like here. And obviously why we have him as the number 1 prospect in this class. How do you envision, Fink, his role evolving at the NBA level? Because we have seen kind of different versions of him over the years, right? Like we've seen him become more of a facilitator at Duke this season. Like he is a really good passer. He's very smart.
Great passer.
And but I don't think that's going to be like, he's not going to walk into the NBA and be a point guard, right? Like that's not the expectation for Cooper Flagg. But at 6'9", like his above average passing will no doubt affect his role at the NBA level. So how do you envision that aspect playing out at the NBA level?
I think there are plenty of people who view him as a point forward type. In fact, I think that was, there are also some programs that recruited him that way. Like, hey, we're not going to play you at the 4. We're going to play you at the 1. We're going to put the ball in your hand. I think his vision and passing ability is there. I don't know that his ability to handle against pressure is there at this point, but that is something you can develop. Like you can develop your handle just like you can develop most ball skills. That lots of times that's just a matter of reps. In terms of his role, I do think that that's still somewhat ambiguous. Like, could he end up being a primary guy in the NBA? Sure. I'm not going to, given the growth he's showing this year and the fact that he's done it before, not going to rule that out at all. Does he have to be? No. So like, I think the ultimate luxury in drafting Cooper Flagg is you can say, hey, no matter how this goes, he's going to be able to fit. If he ends up being the guy that we clearly build around, great. That's the ideal scenario. But if he ends up being, a great player, but not a go-to level scorer for a championship team, then he's, like this generation Scottie Pippen. I mean, I'm not, but something like that. Like, so I that's a huge luxury for roster construction if you draft him, because there's not many scenarios he can't fit on. and you can go back to watch that Montverde tape. I mean, people don't remember his first year at Montverde, like Liam McNeely and Derek Queen, like those were the leading scorers on that team. And Cooper was third. And even his senior year, there were plenty of times where it was like, hey, it was other guys who got going. So USA basketball, same thing. He can impact the game in so many different ways. He doesn't need to dominate the ball. He doesn't need to take all the shots. And again, that's just the ultimate luxury when you're building a roster with him on it.
Yeah. Talking about this, I think it's interesting to kind of get a feel for what type of role he'll be playing in the NBA level. Pro comps, I think, gives people an idea, maybe of what to expect. And I know in the past, like people love to hate on pro comps because they're not perfect, and yet we still have to make them.
Can we do like a 30-second rant of why we need to make
absolutely them? Please take longer. Yes.
Here's the thing. One, if you're watching this at home and you're a fan, it gives you a frame, like some context, a frame of reference. I just mentioned Scottie Pippen. I'm not saying his game's exactly like Scottie Pippen. I'm saying from a role standpoint, maybe he could fit that kind of role. The other reason, quite frankly, NBA scouts and executives do this all the time. Same reason. They're just looking for context. If you're the scout that's watched Cooper Flagg play 30 times and your executive's only getting ready to see him for the first time because he's off doing the other things, and he's going to say, who does he, give me the comp. So this is very frequent. It's an imperfect science, but it's just about like getting an archetype of a player.
Right. Yes, I agree with that. I'll go first here. I think he's a hybrid between Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid.
Wow. Okay.
I'm joking.
I did.
I may be trolling here. My actual comp is Franz Wagner. And so that's someone who I was really high on during the NBA draft process. He's been very good.
I'm going to need a minute. No, keep going.
People that are listening may actually get that reference. So if so, I apologize. You're welcome. But yeah, like in terms of Wagner's like actual role with the Magic now, like the assist rate is actually pretty similar with Flagg and with Wagner right now. Rebounding, obviously, it's going to give Flagg a pretty significant advantage just because of the role he plays. But defensively, he's a different type of prospect in that he's more of a 4 than a 3. But yeah, like the defensive impact that he brings to the table, I think would be very similar to Wagner, and the versatility, the shooting, like he can do all of those different things. We don't want to necessarily, throw someone into a corner and say like, okay, you're only going to be this type of prospect. Like that is why I also have a problem with pro comps, because you say Franz Wagner and immediately you're like, oh my gosh, we're talking about Cooper Flagg, potential generational prospect as like Franz Wagner. Like, number one, don't slander Franz Wagner, but also
thank you.
There's only like shades of his game that I see.
Right.
And so like the Ringer does a really good job of this when they do their NBA draft.
It's not easy. The comp thing is not easy.
Absolutely.
Because you're inviting people to call you an idiot. And granted, that happens every day, but like it just makes it like you're doing something that there's no right answer for. But still, it's fun and it's relevant, so we do it.
Exactly. So the shades of, I think, like the Ringer does on their draft guide, makes a lot of sense. Like there's no one-to-one comparison, but I think Franz Wagner makes a lot of sense for me. Fink, who is your pro comp for Mr. Cooper Flagg?
So to start the season, it was Andrei Kirilenko. Elite defender, elite defensive playmaker, particularly off the ball. Admittedly, I think Cooper's offensive growth has probably exceeded that comp. So I still, I do think there are some shades of potential to play a Scottie Pippen type role, like could be the best number 2 in the league. And if someone goes to play baseball, could also be one of, could also at times turn into an elite primary if he's in the prime of his career. Not saying he plays the same position, not saying, none of that, just in terms of like what his role could be. And there are still some shades of Kirilenko as well.
Man, you are old, Fink. You are so old. Talking Scottie Pippen and Kirilenko. These guys have been out of the league for
Yeah, I guess I
Since
did
I was
date
in
myself,
diapers,
didn't I?
jeez.
Yeah, I guess I did date myself. I could have gone Mo Bamba, but I decided, I'm not being literal, folks. If you know, you know. If you know, you know.
ClearLy's a good one though. Like I actually have seen that one passed around, and it makes a lot of sense. Like that's someone
Who?
who Kirilenko, like his
Yeah.
game, he was maybe like ahead of the curve, right? Like he would have been in the modern NBA, like
He was also better than people realize. Like I
yeah,
say Kirilenko and people are like, and it's like, wait. He was a dude, like an absolute dude.
yes,
And really like changed the game legitimately on both ends of the floor.
yeah. Having watched Cooper this season, Fink, what are some areas you think that he needs to improve on as he gets ready for the NBA draft? I think like I'd like to see his shooting kind of continue to improve. Like
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
impressed with the development for sure. Would like to see him maybe be a little bit more comfortable, like walking into dribble jumpers, maybe shooting a little bit more off movement. But like you're kind of asking for, you know, a guy who's basically a perfect prospect to like kind of fill out areas where like you don't necessarily need, but we can still be picky. We can pick nits here. What do you want to see from Cooper, over the next couple months as Duke finishes the season?
So if we acknowledge that the self-creation and the shooting were the two primary variables coming into the season, and say like, hey, both have trended in a really positive direction, but we want to see that continue, right? And specifically with the shooting, like I said, I want to see the mechanics of the shot be more consistent regardless of the type of shot he's taking. I'd love to see him get rid of that spot up set shot and just go into get more elevation on his ball like he does when he's shooting on the move and shooting off the dribble. I actually think his stroke is much cleaner when he's shooting on the move or shooting off the dribble. And when it's a spot up shot, all of a sudden the elevation leaves and he's shooting a set shot. The other point I'll make, and before I do, want to shout out Sam Vecini, friend of the show, as he would say, because he made this point on his show last week, and I meant to text him, but that Australia, I don't want to wake him up in the middle of the night and just say like, hell of a point. I completely agree. And I actually said this at one point in high school and, got like really criticized for it. I don't know that Cooper is quite as elite as advertised as an on-ball defender, meaning laterally.
Yeah.
I think now this is super nitpicky. So just admittedly, but I think he tends to be kind of hunched over, like leaning forward in his stance. He has such great recoverability because of the shot blocking that I think sometimes people don't, at least in high school, there were times where he got a bad angle and people wouldn't even recognize it because then he'd recover with this exceptional block. But if you're being asked to guard Jason Tatum or Anthony Edwards or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that initial angle, there might not be any coming back from. So if we're talking about somebody who's got like being talked about as this elite defender, I think there is room to grow in terms of his on-ball defense.
Man, and it's a credit to Duke too, like what they've been able to do with him. Like Duke is number one in KenPom right now. Their net rating is better than number one Auburn. Their offense and adjusted efficiency rankings is number 4, and defense it's number 2. And when you think of Cooper Flagg, you don't think necessarily like a lockdown defender. Like that's
People
not.
do. Some people do. I'm with you. Some people do though. Yeah.
That's not how I see him. And when you watch Duke, like basically John Shire say like, hey, would you like to play free safety for us? Like just go be our eraser. Go attack baskets. Go try and block shots. Go try and be a weak side shot blocker. Just go and like fix all of our mistakes. And like that team is really, really smart in the way they're put together. Like Zion James has really had a good season. Con Canoopel, who we talked about last week, 6'7", has flown under the radar, and I think has done a really good job improving on his defense as well. The team is long. The pieces fit. Kamen Malawach is obviously someone who can play on the back end as well. So, yeah, like just I think that's probably right. The defense, it probably goes for every single prospect in this class, could probably use some improvement. But yeah, with Flagg specifically, like maybe on ball in terms of his mechanics, in terms of staying in front of the ball, he makes a ton of flash plays that get the wow and, you know, the blocks and all that stuff. But honing and kind of refining some of those technical areas, I think will go a long ways for him in terms of his NBA draft stock.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
Okay. I see some comments in the chat here. So I'm going to
hit me. What do we got?
I'm gonna throw a curveball here. I didn't tell Nada I'm gonna do this, but
yeah, and I can't see the chat, so this is gonna be
I love it.
It's gonna be entertaining.
So first comment was from Isaac Terry. Said, "Good afternoon to Joshua Jefferson and Joshua Jefferson only." Just wanted to acknowledge that fellow a Cyclones fan there having a good season. Lucky Two Guns says, "What makes Cooper Flagg's game different from Ace Bailey?" This is a Fink special.
It's the versatility. It's the ways he can impact the game outside of scoring. Cooper is a phenomenal passer. Ace is a Cam Whitmore level passer, which means he doesn't like to do it. Cooper actually puts more pressure on the rim than Ace, which is counterintuitive because Ace is a little bit more explosive athletically. Cooper is more impactful on the defensive end, particularly off the ball. The bottom line is if you said like, hey, both players are going to score 8 points in tonight's game, do they help you win? The answer for Ace would be maybe not. The answer for Cooper would be absolutely.
Right. Yes. Man, that's really well put. Damn.
Thanks, Boone.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And watching Ace this season, like the shot making is insane.
Yeah,
it's very good. Like you watch him and the highlights are incredible.
And you're like, am I watching Tracy McGrady? That's when you watch Ace when he's on a night. That's what you're like. Ooh, this is, you know. Now I'm not saying he's Tracy McGrady. I'm just saying like his best version brings up that comp.
For sure. He does like to settle a lot. He loves seeing his own shot fly and doesn't necessarily like to get others involved. Now that may be a good thing on this Rutgers team, but I think it is probably more of him and his game as opposed to like a reflection of the team specifically. Like I think that's kind of just how he likes to play.
That's who he is. Yeah. Right now, right, and I think that's a huge point right now.
For sure. So yeah, they're not really comparable. Again, it's like the chicken beef.
You could make the upside argument though. Like you could say Ace has a higher. That's a very legitimate argument to make that Ace may have the better upside. I don't buy it right at the moment, but it's a legitimate argument.
Yeah, athletically he is 99th percentile shot making, better than anyone in this class. He doesn't really like to get downhill to the basket very much. When he does it, I think it does look well. And I think his finishing ability could use some improvement. So maybe he's just decided like, hey, I'm a great shot maker. I'm a shot taker. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put up buckets, Cam Thomas style.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I'll leave that one there with you.
We've now compared Ace to Cam Whitmore and Cam Thomas. Yikes. Sorry, Ace. I mean, those are great players, obviously great, but like, yeah.
We both really like Ace too, and that's what's so funny.
No doubt.
Is, when you're talking about guys who we both have as consensus top 3 picks and prospects in the class, like you're picking Nits, and I think with Ace, like again, super young, great frame, great shot maker, great athlete. You're hoping the defense comes around. You're hoping that he can be a little bit more versatile in terms of his style of play. Like, can you throw Ace Bailey into the Oklahoma City Thunder right now and ask him to be like a winning player on that team? You might be able to, honestly, but I could confidently put Cooper Flagg on the
Cooper Flagg is much. Cooper Flagg is much more reliable in that circumstance right now.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Just a little fun. I wanted to play with some comments here. Appreciate you guys.
Do it again next week. Bring the comments. Can we like answer one question a week? Is that fair? Can we do it?
Yeah. Well, we'll have to get Nada's permission. And Nada's not feeling well today. He is under the weather, so we want to wish
toughness.
Nada. What a grinder. Appreciate Nada being here. Appreciate you guys watching either live or coming back to watch. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, CBS Sports College Basketball on YouTube. We'll do this every week on Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for watching. we'll see you guys next time.